Hey guys, Nightfall here. I just wanted to take a few minutes to quickly cover gearing a Warlock for Mythic Plus. Now I'm going to start by going over stats, then tier, then I'm going to rank the legendaries, or at least some of them, and then I'm going to show some possible sets. So, for Warlock, for gearing in Mythic Plus, the first mistake that every Warlock's going to make when they first start running Mythic Plus is they're going to keep their raid set on and only maybe change legendaries. And that is going to put you behind on the meters on just about every single fight, except the bosses maybe. So, this is primarily due to one thing. Mastery. Mastery is a stat that Warlocks stack until a certain point around 120% or so, and then haste and crit start to take over. You see that in sort of Heroic and Taurus, your haste and crit will start to take over, but the old rule of thumb was that mastery was worth slightly more than haste and crit. So mastery is something that Warlocks will have a lot of. But if you read it, it says increases damage done by agony, corruption, and an unstable affliction. Well, those are only 3-year spells. What happens when you're running Sow the Seeds and 75% of your damage comes from Seed of Corruption for a pull? What's Mastery doing? Well, Mastery is doing nothing. 75%, 80%, 85% of your damage coming from Seed of Corruption. Say you do a mega pull, like the top of the boat on Maw of Souls, you pull everything, and 85% of your damage comes from Seed of Corruption, and only about 10% comes from Agony and Corruption, and none from Unstable Affliction, because you're just AoEing. Well, what's this 13,500 Mastery doing for you? Well, it's not doing a lot. It's doing almost nothing. Instead, you want other stats, because other stats will still benefit your Agony, Corruption, Unstable Affliction. Not as much. And obviously, you probably really don't even want to be worrying about Unstable Affliction. You'll be in your Mastery set when you're really using a lot of Unstable Afflictions, but for Agony and Corruption, Haste, Crit, and Verse, they also increase the damage. They're not far behind Mastery, even when you dump a lot of Mastery. And Seed of Corruption benefits from them. So what you actually want to do is, it takes a lot of simming and a lot of practice to figure this out, and you have to fiddle around with the settings for the sims to actually get it to sim the right kind of setup. But you'll find that when you're spamming Seed of Corruption, your best stat's haste, by far. I mean, once you start AoEing, you'll see your haste, the value of your haste, go up like 3-4 times what it was before. So that means when you're going for these big AoE pulls, you want to swap out a percentage of mastery roughly on par with how much Seed of Corruption is doing now. So say Seed of Corruption is 65% of your damage. Aim to swap out about 65% of your mastery for haste. And if you can't get haste, crit. If 85%, swap out 85% of your total mastery. And I don't mean like 130 going down to 45. I mean like 85% of 130. But you get what I mean. You want to swap it out for haste and crit. Verse is just always going to be one of your worst stats. So Verse doesn't matter. I mean, if you can't get anything else, get Verse. But still, just like Intellect. Can't get anything else, get Verse, get Intellect. But really, you want your haste and your crit for your AoE. So going into tier sets. Just got a mouse over tier 21. 2-set bonus. When Agony deals damage, 8% chance to increase duration of Unstable Affliction. Now, if you're AoEing, you're not casting Unstable Affliction, are you? Not really. So what's it doing? It's doing nothing. It's literally doing nothing, because you're not casting Unstable Affliction. So 2-set bonus does nothing for AoE. 4-set? Okay, your 4-set bonus... it procs off Seed of Corruption, increases damage, agony, corruption, and Siphon Life. You're not going to be running Siphon Life in Mythic Plus. You shouldn't be. But agony and corruption by 15%. Well, on those big AoE pulls, it's 10% of your damage. So 15% of 10%, 1.5% damage increase. Swapping out your 4-set for just big Titan Forges with haste and crit will add a lot more damage than 1.5%. So really, 4-set's not that good for AoE. Not really worth it. If you can swap it out for Titan Forge pieces with haste and crit for your AoE, you're going to get a lot more out of those Titan Forge pieces and no tier bonus than you would from the 4-set bonus. So 2-set does nothing, 4-set does so little that swapping out some big pieces of gear and breaking your 4-set is better for AoE. So after that, I'm going to go into legendaries. So for legendaries, you have tier 1, 2, and 3. At least that's what I put in the Wowhead guide. Really, you have tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. There's only one legendary ranked tier 0 above everything else. And that legendary is Sephuz. Sephuz, if you can proc it on cooldown, is the best possible legendary for every Warlock spec in every situation. It is by far and above the best legendary, provided you can proc it every 30 seconds. It should always be on in whatever set you're using if you can proc it. If you can't proc it, obviously don't use it. But seriously, if you can use it, if you can proc it, use it. Now, your tier 1, for 1 to 3 targets, your helm should always be on. Doesn't matter if you're using Sephuz, then you're using Sephuz helm. Because if you're targeting 1 to 3 targets, that helm should be on if you're using tier 21. Because combined with your 4-set, this helm and your Writhe in Agony that you'll be running in Mythic Plus, this helm is really, 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 really good. This helm is your next best legendary. As you can see, though, going into another tier 1 legendary, I'm using Soul of the Netherlord. Everyone will always say, the sim says Pride As is higher, the sim says Pride As is higher, the sim says... Yeah, but the sim isn't smart. I have looked at how the different sims they've used over the course of the Legion have run, you know, what parameters they're using, I guess you could call it, how they're casting their abilities. And the sim isn't smart enough to get the full value out of Soul of the Netherlord. You as a player are, with little practice, Soul of the Netherlord will deal a noticeable amount more damage than Pride As, provided your target dies at 0%. If it's Heimdall, if it's Odin, if it's Helya, because it only works on her tentacles, if it is the first boss of Court of Stars and you've poisoned the vial, don't use this because it's a ramping execute. That's what you gotta play to. You gotta play to the legendary. So a lot of Warlocks, when first using this legendary, they'll just say, oh, it hit 35%. It's time to execute and start dumping UAs. No, you're getting 5% bonus damage from that. That's nothing. That's almost as if you're not executing. But when you get to around 15 to 20% health on the boss, you're getting 20% damage, 25% damage, 30% damage, all the way up to 50% increased damage right before the boss dies. So to play to this legendary and get more out of it than Pride As, what you need to do is you need to keep saving those unstable afflictions, obviously without letting Tormented Agony really drop off. If you're running Contagion, don't really let Contagion drop off for too long. But save as many as possible for as late as possible without overcapping shards. So don't get to 5 shards. Make sure you're always at least at 4, if not a little lower, because you don't want to risk proccing a shard when you don't have space for a shard, because then you lose millions and millions of damage to a shard vanishing into the ether. But then, once you get really low, start stacking more and more and more unstable afflictions. You want your last unstable affliction, you want to have 0 shards when your target dies, and you want the last tick of the last unstable affliction to be as close to the killing blow as possible. That will get you the most damage possible out of this legendary. Now, if you're not comfortable with that, or if your target is not dying at 0%, they're dying before 0%. Where is it? I seem to have lost it. Here we go. Helm Neck, the go-to. Helm Neck, Pride As, big-ass stat stick. Really good. Not really the best, though. Not really. But very, very, very good, and especially if you're not comfortable with maximizing your execute. So, with that, I've really covered all the good legendaries for both AoE and single target, because in AoE I have lately been using the execute ring. Now, I've had too many pointless arguments in Discords and forums, because everyone will say, why are you using that for AoE? It doesn't affect Seed of Corruption. Actually, it does. Seed of Corruption damage, along with your Agony Corruption, but those are minor. And you can treat it just like you do on Unstable Affliction, sort of hold some of your shards till the very end. So what you'll see is like, you're third out of the 3 DPS, just a little under number 2 while you're AoEing, And then when it drops below 35%, you start dumping more and more shards. You'll rocket up to first place in the AoE meters. Really worth it. As you can see, this is my AoE set. Now getting into your setups for gear with your 2 legendaries. So this is what I run for AoE. Some people are still running the chest, but this is a gamble. This is a huge gamble, because if it doesn't proc, or if it procs at the wrong time, it's basically a big stat stick, but not a good stat stick, not a particularly good stat stick, so it's a DPS loss if this thing doesn't proc or procs at the wrong time. But with the legendary ring, you always get the benefit from it. And you already saw my 1 to 3 target sets. You know, execute ring or Pride as. Use that first phase of Fenrir, Odin, Helya, things like that. And you'll notice I didn't say anything about your Sacrilash, because that's more for utility, for slowing things. Equip it when you need to. Obviously don't unequip Cephus for it. If you're using the Cephus set, use Cephus and Sacrilash. Now you can see I have some other stuff in here. I'm not really going to go into crit. Crit is just for Soul Flame, because Soul Flame doesn't gain anything from haste. So if I want to do a huge Soul Flame at like the first pull in Arcway, I'll equip a crit set. But other than that, these are very finicky things like an avoidance set. But really, that is the most that you really need to know to get into some good level Mythic Plus keys. When you go into AoE, you want Haste Crit, because Seed of Corruption gains nothing from Mastery. If you know how to plate your Legendary and backload as much damage as possible for as late as possible, Soul of the Netherlord will be best in slot, really, except, obviously not above Cephus, but it will be your next best Legendary. And you really don't want to unequip that helm on single target. Now, obviously you see I have a Portal Pants set as well, but that's just for getting around. And I guess I'll take just 1 minute here to talk about trinkets, but unfortunately I don't have the trinkets that I want, so it's pretty hard for me to show you. I'll have to go into the dungeon journal. So this is what I use on, you know, your 1 to 3 targets, you know, your unstable affliction kind of stuff. You got Norganon's Prowess, but that's only because it's 1,000 item level. You know, Mastery, it's alright. I need it for the 1 to 3 targets. Intellect's your worst stat, but 20,000 Intellect's a lot. It's just higher. I do not have a Mythic Injector yet, so I'm still using an unstable Arcano Crystal. If you get like a 950, 955 plus Injector, go ahead and use that. It is really good all around, everywhere from 1 to 100 targets. You want that on. So, for things I don't have. So for single target, like I said, you'd want Norganons and a big Injector. But I don't have a big Injector, so I can't show you that on my actual character. But for AoE, you'd want a big Injector, maybe a giant Arcana Crystal. But also, on top of whichever one you have that is better, your second trinket, Prototype Personal Decimator. Great. It gives a lot of haste, your best stat for AoE. Only thing to warn you about, is that when you're in a tight and close space and really have to sort of thread the needle between packs without pulling them, I wouldn't use this. This deals damage to all enemies within 20 yards, so you'll be pulling things through walls, out of buildings in Court of Stars, and things like that. So when you're in a tight space, definitely unequip this. And some people will say Terminus. Unfortunately, with Terminus, first off, it gives Mastery, which isn't good for your AoE. And you're never going to do as much damage as a Fire Mage does with it, because it takes space off of your stats and your bonus damage and stuff like that. You cannot stack anywhere near the % bonus damage that a Fire Mage can do. So the Fire Mage is going to do twice as much with this trinket as you will. No matter what you do, the Fire Mage is going to do way more than you. Now, if you have like 60 targets, someone just pulled half the instance, and you're going to be fine, and they stack it all up, yeah, sure, if it's going to survive for the full thing, the 9 seconds there, absolutely, this is fine. Or if it's your first pull, and you have no Tormented Souls, and it's going to be a quick pull, so you're not going to generate any, so you might as well use this, because I mean, at least it's some damage, or else you're going to do like a million DPS, because you've got no souls, no shards, nothing to work with. At least this will do some damage, but really, this is lower down on the list. Lower than Arcano Crystal, lower than Decimator, lower than Injector, but it's still there. That's really all the trinkets that are worth covering as far as DPS go. And I'm not really going to get too much into survivability. That's a topic for another video. I've already gone on way longer than I wanted with this video. So I'm just going to quickly wrap up. Just to remind everyone, when you're AoEing, Mastery does nothing for AoE, but you just want to generally wear your raid set for 1 to 3 targets. Play your legendaries, and Soul the Netherlord will be better. Sephuz is the best above everything else. If you're on 1 to 3 targets, your Helm will be better than Soul by a little bit. And if you're not comfortable using Soul the Netherlord, Friedaz is a good go-to. I like Double Ring. You can try the chest. The chest is a gamble. And we just went over trinkets. But just again, big stat ones are the best ones for your AoE. The 1000 item level 1 for Norganons is good for single target. Prototype if you're not in an enclosed space. And really, it just takes more practice. That's it. Once you start making these sets, start working with them, you're going to go ahead and see a vast increase in your damage if you haven't been doing this. But that's all for now. I'll be coming back with more videos later in the week. Take care, guys.